It's not a no word at all, but you're welcome to fill that out. We do an email newsletter if you want to put your email on it. If you want more information about the church or what goes on here, you're welcome to fill that out, and you're welcome to leave that on that little black table back there or on the back counter. Just want to be a blessing. We're just Jesus followers who are trying to honor him and bless him and serve other people. We're in Luke 12, but let me get to that in just a moment. I just had something. You never know what's going to happen in life. I was traveling south here on 41 this morning before Sunday school, and I'm at the stoplight. I think it's Constitution where the arches are, I think. So I'm there at the stoplight. I'm in the inside lane. I look up in my rearview mirror, and there is a car that's about to barrel down. I mean, just this morning here, about to barrel right in the back of me. Why do I know that? Because I'm looking at her. I just cleaned my rearview mirror, so I know it's clear. And she is looking down. And I'm bracing for impact. I really am, because she's looking down, and I'm thinking, I don't have any more room to inch up to go, okay, and she looks up and does that. You can see it silently, like that, screech, and doesn't touch me. So, it's interesting that life can just change in an instant. We're not guaranteed anything in this life except salvation and the fact that we will depart here someday. But it's just amazing how just stuff happens. I was just had a car guy yesterday, and he was talking about, hey, I just found out I went out in front of my garage and saw water flowing from underneath the garage door. Just stuff happens, and now he's a very, likes things very orderly. And so all his stuff from the garage is outside drying out, and it's just, so I was at his car place, and he was like, it's driving me crazy because it's still out in my driveway, But to replace an old, you just never know what's going to happen in life. You just never know. So, you didn't know that we would continue on in our teaching in Luke 12. We're going to go through this until we're done. I don't know how many's in here, probably 3 or 4. We'll see what God does. But right now we're on this teaching on material possessions, what Jesus teaches on it. And it can get a little tricky when you start talking finances and material possessions with Americans in 2024. Yeah, you could have done that probably 20 years ago and still be offensive. But, so I want to do a disclaimer. First off, there is a bigger introduction than I've ever written before, and it's basically a cultural piece to bring us up to speed with where we're at as Americans. It's a very, very shallow overview of pages and pages of an introduction, which is unusual. Instead of, is he going to get to the text? Is he going to get there? So I'm just doing that as a disclaimer. And the other thing is, we were talking about this idea of biblical interpretation and also biblical application, if you will, in regards with how you see this, how you read this, particularly when it was written 2,000 years ago, and Jesus is saying these words to a completely different cultural nuance in a completely different country and setting, and to be able to go, how you apply that really, I think, takes a lot of prayer, because sometimes you just don't know how to handle sometimes text. So I'm telling you that I prayed and I've done my best, and I want God to do his work in this. And so, Lord, if you would speak and that you would minister even now in the name of Jesus. Amen. So it'll be Luke chapter 12 that we're in, but we'll get there eventually, I promise. So when you hear the term American dream, think about what comes to your mind, because it's different maybe when you grew up, what you heard about the American dream being when you were younger to what it is now, to maybe when you were a young adult. The term was first coined by James Truslow Adams in his book, Epic in America, in 1931. In 1931, he wrote this: "The American dream is that dream of a land which life should be better and richer and fuller for everyone, with opportunity for each according to ability or achievement. It is not a dream of motor cars and high wages merely, but a dream of social order in which each man and each woman shall be able to attain to the fullest stature of which they are innately capable, and being recognized by others for what they are, regardless of the fortuitous circumstances of birth or position." They wrote a little differently in 1931. I don't use the word fortuitous very often. So then I have to look at George Carlin to be able to interpret it. Comedian George Carlin said, "It's called the American dream because you have to be asleep to believe it." Dictionary.com gives two meanings to the American dream. First one is the ideals of freedom, equality, and opportunity traditionally held to be available to every American. Second, a life of personal happiness and material comfort as traditionally sought by individuals in the United States. That's the second definition. In the Declaration of Independence, you probably remember these lines. Our founding fathers held that certain truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable right, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Some say that the American dream has become the pursuit of material prosperity, that people work more hours to get bigger cars, fancier homes, better technology, and to pay off more debt. The fruits of prosperity for their families, but they have less time to enjoy their prosperity. And now it's common language to refer to the American dream as home ownership. Others say that the American dream is beyond the grasp of the working poor who work 2 to more jobs to ensure their family's survival, yet others look toward a new American dream with less focus on financial gain and more emphasis on living a simple, fulfilling life. And you see a lot of people going to small houses, simpler lifestyles, simplicity. It's challenging in our culture to look past our own personal issues, problems, and circumstances. Because as I say, we look through everything from our own personal lens. And many times it has a very selfish orientation because it's what? My lens, right? I can't get outside of that. So we become nearsighted in our worldview. We are narcissistic in our understanding that every issue, every problem, every advertisement, sin, blessing, etc., either deals with me or it doesn't. And these thoughts constantly come against us so much that we rarely consider the distant other in society. So this morning, I believe God wants to challenge us to live and to think in a different way with worry and fear, which, by the way, that's the next text in Luke chapter 12 is do not worry. Jesus, these are all red letters in chapter 12 of Luke. So with worry and fear ruling our land, from layoffs to cutbacks to losing 401ks, to foreclosure, to unemployment, to inflation, watching the stock market, taxes, and the fear of the future, we need a good dose of hope in Jesus. That's what I'm saying. The truth is, we already have it. We already have hope in Christ. That's the beauty of the gospel. That's the beauty of living in Christ. So, the simple truth is, like Peter, we need to get our focus off the wind and the waves. They will always be around. There's always going to be somebody on their cell phone ready to barrel you in the backside. So we need to keep and turn our focus continually on Jesus while doing the impossible of walking on the water. I mean, really, how hard can that be? To understand where we're going this morning, we first have to look back at culture, where we came from and what we live in now. It's very missionary-like, very missionary-focused to be able to study the culture which you're going to go in and try to make a difference and try to connect with. Many times we have a problem understanding our own culture and the whys of why people act the way they do or think the way they do. So we're going to look back when Thomas Jefferson penned the second and the final draft of the Declaration, stating that all are created equal. We have certain inalienable rights, including life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Because this was a much to do about freedom. Freedom from the tyranny of England, freedom to worship, freedom to speak, to assemble, freedom from taxation without representation. The pursuit of happiness was the result of freedom. So in the 1910s and the 1920s, American factories pumped out ways of new devices to make life easier. It was in the 1920s that for the first time, in some ways, Americans began to see themselves, one of the first times, as consumers. Historian David Farber said it was realized that American happiness was something you could purchase. The real issue, so this isn't anything new with us, by the way, this is 100 years ago. The real issue is that was only true for about 20% of Americans. About 80% didn't have savings and were meager in lifestyle and income. So when the crash of the stock market happened in 1929, and the stock market at its very worst lost about 90% of its value, the trickle-down effect happened across the board. Large amounts of wealth were lost and unemployment hit 25%. When Franklin Roosevelt campaigned in 1932, he promised a return to what? Happy days. At his inauguration, FDR declared the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. In 1944, in his speech, FDR went farther than any other president in history to declare economic security as a birthright. This is where we live. This is the stuff that we are foundationally in, that if we understand history, we know, why do we think this way? Why are we so narcissistic? Why are we so financially focused? A lot of this is because of the history that we have walked through. So I'm just setting this stage for Jesus' words to be able to be heard here in 2024 in Lee County. Roosevelt's New Deal had already put in place an economic safety net that included Social Security for the aged and sick, and insurance payments for the jobless. But this time, Roosevelt suggested Americans should be guaranteed even more. He called these entitlements a second Bill of Rights. Among them were, quote, the right to a job, the right to a living wage, the right of every family to a decent home, the right to adequate medical care and the opportunity to achieve and enjoy good health, the right to adequate protection from economic fears of old age and sickness and accident and unemployment, and finally, the right to a good education. Of the many things passed and signed, one of them was the GI Bill. The GI Bill ensured that all vets coming back from the war were to get free tuition into college and major subsidies to buy a home. As a result, there was an unprecedented post-war prosperity. And this went hand in hand with mass consumption. The average American now had a home, a car, and many stores to go shopping in. The culture in the post-World War II period had been built around mass consumption, and that actually continued through the 1960s, which some of us might be familiar with or were maybe born around in. Now, David Farber says the 60s were the most prosperous time in American history. Suddenly, working class Americans were homeowners. They could buy a boat sometimes. They could certainly buy a car, televisions, all kinds of good stuff. And it was a widespread phenomenon in the United States. Family incomes were rising more. More women were added to the workforce, and the next expansion was the Great Society, coinciding with the Vietnam War. The 1970s were gloomy economically as a result. Inflation was the theme of the 70s, if you remember some of that period. The war cost was astounding for the period, and fuel shortages were normal. We were told to cut back, change the thermostat, drive less, and conserve. You know what? That did not settle well with Americans. Why? Because we were used to what we had. And when what we had is gone or shortened, oh boy, that's why the politics of the day centers around so much of economic stuff. Why? Because that's highly important to Americans. The economy is hugely, hugely important. This is why Jesus' words really land well with us today. Then, we decided we were going to beat inflation, so we learned how to use credit cards in the 70s. By building up debt. Credit cards were just a savvy way to stay ahead. The 80s were a period of freeing business with less government and trickle-down effect, and Wall Street was now coming into the average American language. Never before had the average American gotten into stock market and understood what was going on. Back in the 20s, it was just for the privileged, those little few percenters that got into the stock market. Now it's kind of normal that people understand 401ks, mutual funds, stocks. Wall Street became a part of pop culture, not just for the rich anymore. It is for the average American. In the 90s, and we'll call them the double O's, we experienced a rise in wealth, especially among the top 25%. We also began to see the same time borrowing and debt rise while getting bigger houses, nicer cars, better stuff, and more stuff. At the same time, we saw a slow but ever-increasing rise and the crossroads into debts, defaults, foreclosures, and bankruptcy. We borrowed off our houses, and our ability to pay more challenging, and the bubble finally popped around that 2007-2008 period. So with our rich history, you can see an unprecedented period of wealth for a majority of the nation, not just for the rulers or elite. Can I just say this has never really happened in any time in history, anywhere in recorded history, that we have had such huge economic prosperity across a major swath of any nation. Never happened before. It's incomparable. God has done so many wonderful things, so many acts of grace, so many missionaries sent as a result of this. At the same time, we've also witnessed an age of class warfare, class envy, the haves and the have-nots. We compare our wealth with someone who is what? Wealthier. So we'll never have enough. Why? Because we see those 1%ers, those 2%ers, and we go, yeah, but I'm not like that. And then we understand that if you look at world economic understanding, every American, the poorest American, is in the top 3% of wage earning. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Well, but I'm not talking about the world. I'm talking about those guys. And so the difference in how we look at people and how we look at finances and how we judge people. Oh, man, can they really afford that? They've got 2 of those? I mean, we look and we begin judging people based upon economic issues. And so we equate wealth and prosperity sometimes, even to God's blessing. We've really butchered this thing sometimes, even in the church. And we've seen this thing as something that God has now got his hand upon me. Why? Because I got a raise. God has his hand upon me because I got more money. God has his hand upon me. Man, we've got to guard our hearts. And as you can see, our cultural makeup has been so economically based. It is part of American DNA. Why? Because it's even in the church. This DNA, to recognize it, is half the battle. If you understand your own culture and the culture I live in, then I can go, okay, now I can deal with God's word and the text that this is speaking. And you're not talking about those rich Pharisees or somebody else that's the somebody else that you're always listening to as Jesus is talking, going, oh, I know those people that he's talking about. Then I can go, oh, he may be speaking to me. So now that we set the stage, we're going to try to get into this a little bit. We need to understand God's word, obeying it. And we're in this battle. We're in this world, but we are not of it. The days are long over when you could trade 1,000 head of cattle and 5,000 acres with a handshake. Why? Because now we have to worry, we fear, we mistrust. We got to have a contract. This has to be in writing. We have to have lawyers. We have to back ourselves up. Why? Because we don't trust anybody else. You can't do handshake deals anymore. So allow me to say, there has never been a better time than now for God's people to demonstrate a biblical understanding and a view on material possessions. Now we'll get into the text. First off, we must guard our hearts from multiple kinds of greed. The text starts out this is all Jesus' words here in chapter 12. It starts out in chapter 12 at verse 13. We're going to just read the 2 verses here for right now. Someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Jesus replied, "Man, who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you?" Now, if you recall, Jesus just prior, last week we were talking about it in the beginning of chapter 12, Jesus was teaching on not fearing those who could kill the body, but drag the soul to hell. That was his teaching. Don't worry about what you're going to say. The Holy Spirit will teach you what to say. And immediately following that teaching, someone wants to settle an inheritance dispute. It kind of reminds me of the disciples as they're going into Jerusalem into the final week. And James and John talking about, hey, they're arguing about who is going to sit on your left and who's your right. After Jesus had just said, the Son of Man is going to be surrendered over to the authorities, and he's going to be beaten, he's going to be flogged, and he's going to be killed, and on the 3rd day rise again. Well, when you get into Jerusalem, can we sit on your left and right? Kind of tone deaf asking questions. That kind of seems to be this particular thing. Now, it wasn't uncommon for a rabbi to settle a dispute, but Jesus was not going to participate. So instead, he actually what? Addresses the heart. Immediately he does it. The law of the day was simple. If there were two brothers, the eldest got 2/3 of the inheritance, and the younger brother would get 1/3. It's just cut and dry. That was the known law at that particular time. And Jesus knows this is now not a dispute about the amount. This is about something other. It's about greed, and he's addressing that. And Jesus could do that because he knew the hearts of people. Look at verse 15. Verse 15, it says, "Then he said to them, 'Watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. A man's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions.'" The word greed gets translated covetousness. Some of it might be in your Bibles. It says might be covetousness. The NIV has all kinds of greed. The word literally gets translated. It's pretty simple. It's called more having. That's the way the Greek says. It's more having. More. I want more. So however you translate it, greed, all kinds of greed, all greed, or covetousness, it's about this issue of having more. It goes back to our culture of better, more, better, new, more. Jesus' warning is not be careful of all kinds of greed. It's a much stronger warning. This language is much stronger. Guard your heart. You might say to your children when they go outside to play, "Hey, be careful out there." It's one of those generic terms. "Hey, be careful out there." But if there's something really dangerous and you'd say, "Hey, I need you to sit down. Look at me. Look at me right now. I need to tell you this right now. This is really, really important. Do not even go near that street." And you get this more intense, this guarding. This is really important, what I'm saying to you. And Jesus' words here are that. So, on a package of cigarettes, Surgeon General's warning. You remember that guy, right? Quitting smoking now greatly reduces serious risks to your health. You can see how well this stops people. I mean, everybody who gets one of these things reads this and go, "Oh, I probably should set that down." Because, wow. Now, the difference between that kind of warning and one that says, "You're in the hospital in ICU and we've got a piece of your black lung here. I'd like you to look at this x-ray and I'd like you to look at everything. And if you don't stop, you're going to die." There's a little different vibe than on the cigarette package, right? This is Jesus' words here. He's not saying, "Hey, be careful of kinds of greed." He's going, guard your heart. This is a military type term, guard it. This is serious. Greed will hurt you tremendously. Be on your guard against all greed. One night, a thief broke into a single-room apartment of the 19th century French novelist Henri de Balzac. That's just fun to say. Trying to avoid waking Balzac, the intruder quietly picked the lock on the writer's desk. Suddenly, the silence was broken by a sardonic laugh from the bed where Balzac lay watching the thief. The thief asked, "Why do you laugh?" "I'm laughing to think what risk you take to try to find money in a desk that night where the legal owner can never find any by day." Comedian Stephen Wright once said this, "You can't have everything. Where would you put it all?" I thought that was pretty funny, quite honestly. Here's that, anyway. Stuff I think is funny sometimes doesn't work here, but that's okay. It's, anyway, verse, where are we at? 16. The teaching of the parable of the rich fool. Check this out. This is the heart of this particular text here, 16 through 21. "And he told them this parable." And this is off this idea of this dispute about splitting the inheritance right. So now he's not saying, "Hey, you get 2/3, you get 1/3. That would have been easy," because that's just what the law was. But let me talk to you about greed. Guard your heart against this. Then he tells this teaching or this story. "The ground of a certain rich man produced a good crop. He thought to himself, 'What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops.' Then he said, 'This is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of good.'" We used to live in Naples. And we lived in a house, we were in our 30s, maybe late 20s. Yeah, it's probably 28, 29. Okay, so we're still very green, very ignorant about stuff. And they go, people in the neighborhood, in Pine Ridge, the neighborhood, oh, beautiful lots, big lots, and big houses. And we lived in the parsonage. And they go, "Oh, you live in a tear-down house." First time I ever heard that. "You live in a tear-down house." And I go, "I have no idea what that means." And they go, "Well, this house is so small, it doesn't even belong here." So when people would buy that, if they would buy that, they would tear that down because they need a bigger one. that doesn't fit. And it still had 4 walls and everything. But there was the first time I'd ever heard that, and I go, oh. I look and I go, why would you tear this down? It's not like broken or anything. The hurricane hadn't touched it yet. So why would you tear it down like a perfectly good house? Besides, what you can do with duct tape and anyway. Anyway, I just thought about that tear-down house. It's always bothered me ever since that we lived in a tear-down house for several years. It was just funny. I'll say to myself, you have plenty of good things laid up for many years. Take life easy. Eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, this is strong language here. This is really strong. You fool. This very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? This is how it will be with anyone who stores up things for himself, but is not rich toward God. This teaching, this story is power-packed. We can see immediately from this story that this dude in the story that Jesus is describing has an eye problem. Not an eye problem, just an eye problem. Because he uses the term, for this guy, in his language, he uses the term I 5 times, and he uses my 4 times. So it has a little bit of, in 2, 3, 4, 3 verses, I, my, I. The centerpiece of the man is what? The man. His problem, I have too much. I don't know where to put it all. Now, we have talked about stuff before in our garages because I'm a notorious, and we use certain words for it that are even Christian kind of cussing words. But we use terms for it when I go, I got a lot of stuff in my house. And we just like, I don't need any of this stuff. There's stuff in here I haven't touched, right? Guys, you know what I'm talking about, okay? Ladies, I know this is not an issue for you. You never have way too much. Maybe shoes. But anyway, I have way too much stuff here. Where am I going to put it? Now, I'm not condemning those of you that have storage units that never see those. But anyway, I'm not condemning at all. But just you look at this stuff and I go, I just got to get rid of this stuff. And you remember like when you have yard sales or you have a cleaning time and you get rid of boxes and they go to some place else where they'll throw it in a dumpster or maybe sell it for $0.25. You're going to get rid of all this stuff and you go, man, it doesn't look like I've made a dent in this stuff, you know? And I think about this modern understanding of application for me in this. So looking at a couple of things about this rich man and why God called him a fool. I think I've got maybe 7 pieces here. Why does he call him a fool? A, he devoted all his energy to gaining earthly possessions. He failed to realize his dependence and need for God, because you don't see any of this in the story. He didn't seem to show gratitude to God for what he had. He was storing, laying up, or hoarding instead of being generous. He disregarded his responsibility of wealth. He imagined his soul would be nourished and refreshed by his wealth. And lastly, he imagined a life of luxury and ease and self-reliance and self-centeredness. Now, I need to be careful here. So I'd really like you to understand the heart of Jesus in the text of what he's saying of guarding your heart against all kinds of greed. The idea of, I've got so much stuff, I need to tear down what I have so I could build bigger stuff, so I could put more stuff in it, so therefore I can sit back and eat and drink and be happy and take life easy. Our modern view of retirement has become an opportunity for self-indulgence and ease. Now, I am not saying there is a time to set hard work aside, but then you come into a category of elder statesman or an elder stateswoman in the church, and your service is now more valuable because of your life experience and time. You've got some goods that young people do not have. And may I just say, our service to God never retires. I'm glad that many of you have had the opportunity to retire. I really, really am. But I see this warning from Jesus on having a selfish focus of hoarding and a life of ease over generosity, over service to God, over service to others. And gratitude, that is all the Lord's anyway. So, It's not pounding on retirement or wealth and savings by Bruce. That's not what I want to communicate today. But a strong warning to us by Jesus to guard our hearts against all kinds of greed, hoarding, selfishness, self-reliance, and living for self over gratitude to God, service to others, and surrender to Jesus. It's just that simple. So if you can hear the words of Jesus and not condemnation from Bruce, the idea of we need to guard our hearts from this, because everything I talk about prior to this United States understanding of how we see wealth and how we see material possessions has a colored lens that the rest of the world does not have. It doesn't. And so because of that, we live in a place where it is so easy because of class warfare and class envy that we see people, when we think about the rich fool, we have those perfect pictures of those people. So I would like you to ask yourself this. I would like you to ask God if there's anything that needs to be surrendered, changed, or altered in your thinking, your attitudes, or your behavior with your material possessions. This isn't about this deep conviction, oh, I need to get rid of everything because, God's speaking to me. And if he does that, that's fine. But the deal is, it's okay to reevaluate where we're at in our thinking. It's okay to be able to question, God, what do you see in me? What needs to be different in my thinking, my behavior, on how I see things? I have seen all kinds of really cool stuff at the end of people who have made their time to retirement to be able to give and serve in ways that you just go, oh my goodness, what you're given now is greater worth than gold. And we have many people that do that to differing degrees, which is not about the point of more or less. It's just the fact it's a heart issue more than anything else, not an amount issue. So I believe when the heart changes, actions change. So you don't have to address actions and go, here's what you need to do. Bang, 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 bang. But when God addresses the heart, let God deal with that stuff. And I think that works so much better than me going, here's your stuff that you're supposed to do. Here's the 3 things that will change your life. And I think that's pretty cool in the practical end of stuff, but it's really, really, really better that God speaks to you. So when the heart changes, actions change. Verse 20 says this, but God said to him, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? God calls him a fool, not because he's rich. He doesn't call him a fool because he's rich, but because he's disregarded God and because he's not prepared for eternity. His soul should have been willingly given to God, but now God says at your death, your soul will be demanded by God. The Lord then asked the man, who will get everything that now you've stored up for yourself? Who's going to get all that stuff? And it reminds me of Solomon in Ecclesiastes 2, verses 18 through 19. Solomon wrote, I came to hate all my hard work here on earth. That's pretty bizarre. For I must leave to others everything I have earned. And who can tell whether my successors will be wise or foolish? Yet they will control everything I've gained by my skill and hard work under the sun. How meaningless. The key to the story in Luke chapter 12 is verse 21, when Jesus says, this is how it will be with anyone who stores up things for himself, but is not rich toward God. If you want to underline that sentence right there, rich towards God, that is our goal right here. It's not about getting rid of stuff. It's not about this conviction, oh, well, I'm just such a bad person. That is not the point of this. This is a heart issue. What does it look like to be rich toward God? Just in a nutshell. The man's problem in the story that Jesus told was not that he had treasure on the earth, but he was not rich towards God. First off, we must continue to realize and recognize daily that everything that we have, everything that is given to us is by God. Now, do you remember God giving the Jewish nation of Israel the warning about when you get into the land, don't be thinking that you grew this stuff or you somehow just did a great job because you built all this stuff, and don't be saying that you did this, because it's the Lord who gave this stuff to you. He gave you the land to work it. So why? You could make a name for God, for me, for God. This wasn't about you. That I could make you famous so that you would make me famous. Now, everything that we have, everything, and it's not dismissing hard work. It's not dismissing skills that we have in this room. It is not at all. There are some very talented people. As a matter of fact, he's given us all gifts and talents, every single one of us. Nobody's been left behind. So we may work, we may produce, we may earn, but all that and its pay come from a gracious God. We must thank him daily for our daily bread and our sustenance. It's all from him. So therefore, we're glorying in him. Thank you for what you've given me here today. Thank you, God. Everything that we have is given from him. We are to be the most gracious of people, not just because we have, but even when we don't have, we're so grateful. Number 2, we must continue to remember that wealth and material possessions are all temporal in nature. This stuff, what we used to say it in the 70s, it's all going to burn. You can protect it all you want, but it will burn one day, all of it. And it really puts in perspective to go when God destroys this place and comes back to take the church, that none of this stuff's going with us. Never will. So, as 38 Special says, hold on loosely. Hang on loosely? Did I say it wrong? Hey, no. Hold on loosely. Hang on loosely. Hey, don't hold on to it too tightly, because you'll lose control, really. So we're reminded of the words of Job 1:21. Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. It's a very clear understanding. You don't have to go, what does he mean by that? You didn't take anything in here. You don't take anything out. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised. So hold on loosely. All that you see and hold on to is temporary. We're not taking a single blessed thing with us. Number 3. Guard your heart. I would just repeat what's in the red letters. What Jesus said here, guard your heart against the great desire for wealth, material possessions, and the more that goes with this, and the more, and the better, and the new improved. It has been one of those great debate things to be able to go, hey, I just got the newest, and you see the sign on the billboard that says, oh, this is the one that's newer than the one you're just taking home at the time. They're already being made. Whatever new you have, new is already being made newer than what you have. You're always going to be behind. Always, 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 always. So, understand that we need to guard our heart. This is the bigger issue than the amount. This is not about wealth. This is about guarding your heart from greed, material possession stuff that owns our heart and soul. By the way, it is a daunting thing when you think about the history of the globe. In our lifetime. Who has ever heard of the Russian dollar? I can't remember, it slips my mind. Their currency, the ruble. The ruble back in the 80s went down 3 zeros. They took 3 zeros off their money, and then they did it 2 more times. So can you imagine having $100,000 in the bank and going, no, I only have 1. And you go, no, I earned $100,000, and instantly, because of the devalue of the ruble, you have $1 in the bank. You go, what happened to it? It's gone. It's just gone. You don't have it anymore. Zimbabwe, the same way. Inflation went up so high. The dictatorship of Mugabe, that guy, such an evil person, just hurting the people. And they're going, it takes about $800,000 at that time, during the collapse of that, $800,000 to buy a loaf of bread. So we really get this idea of, like, sometimes we don't understand. You go, how, if you're holding on to it tightly, you will be dismayed and you will be hurt beyond, that's why people, the really wealthy in 1929, there's many people that committed suicide because that's where their heart was. That's where their mindset was. We can't live like that. We cannot live like that as followers of Jesus. Our heart has to be in allegiance to him. This is just tools that we're using here. That's all it is. It's just stuff while we're here. So be careful. Guard your heart. 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 9 says, those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. I think sometimes in our culture, well, many times in our culture, we fear the throes of poverty. But I think Jesus is warning us to guard your heart against the throes of great wealth. Because with great wealth comes great responsibility. Number 4, continue becoming rich towards God. I think this is the heart. This is bold it, underline it, highlight it, all caps, if you will. Becoming rich towards God. We need to continue to give generously, like it's not ours. We need to live sacrificially. We need to trust Jesus for every simple gift and every provision, including the breath that we breathe. And never forget the greatest gift that has ever been given to us is the gift of Jesus dying and surrendering himself on the cross for our souls, that we could have new life and rising on the third day, that we could absolutely now have everything that we ever need, eternal life, through the blood of Jesus. Martin Luther said this, I've held many things in my hands and I have lost them all, but whatever I have placed in God's hands, that I still possess. George W. Truett was a well-known pastor. He was invited to a dinner in the home of a wealthy man in Texas, and after the meal, the host led him to a place where they could get a good view of the surrounding area. Pointing to the oil wells punctuating the landscape, he boasted, 25 years ago, I had nothing. Now, as far as you can see, it's all mine. And looking in the opposite direction at his sprawling fields of grain, he said, that's all mine too. Turning east toward the huge herds of cattle, he bragged, and that's all mine. Then pointing to the west and the beautiful forest, and he goes, that too is mine. He paused, expecting Dr. Truett to compliment him on his great success. You're just a genius. You're brilliant. You're wonderful. Oh my goodness, you're just awesome. Truett, however, placed one hand on the man's shoulder and pointing heavenward with the other, simply said, how much do you have in that direction? The man hung his head and confessed, I have never even thought of that. I would implore you to be rich towards the things of God. Patrick Henry said it best, I think. I have now disposed of all my property to my family. There is one thing more I wish I could give them, and that is faith in Jesus Christ. If they had that, and I had not given them a single shilling, they would have been rich. And if they had not had that, and I had given them all the world's desires, they would be poor indeed. If you need to surrender to Jesus today, this is a great day to do that. This is not meant to be a beat-up Americans day, beat-up Christian Americans today with wealth. It's meant to say we need to guard our hearts. We need to have a heart that is rich towards God. This stuff is so temporary. Hold on to it loosely. Be rich towards the things of God. He is so good. And we get to thank him every day for whatever amount, big, little, or medium, or nothing that is in our hands, because we've already had everything in Christ. If you need to surrender to Jesus today, you can come forward as we stand and sing. If you need prayer, if you need to be baptized, you are welcome to come forward as we stand and sing. Let's stand up.